On a small farm, in dense thickets of burdock, the mother duck found a cozy place to build her nest. She waited for the chicks to hatch. One sunny morning, the eggshells crackled and tiny fluffy ducklings were born. There was only one egg left, the largest one that did not want to crack. The duck began to worry that something was wrong with him. She sat down on the egg again and decided to wait a little longer. The duck mom gave all the heat she could. She thought that this chick must be the most beautiful since she has been incubating him for so long. Soon a chick hatched from the last egg, but it did not look like the rest of the ducklings at all. It was much larger, and its feathers were gray. The duck mom was upset to see such an ugly son. But she hoped that someday he would become like his fellows. The rest of the ducklings laughed at him. They considered him disgusting and did not want to play with him. The next morning, the mother duck went with her children to the lake. To her surprise, the ugly duckling swam as well as others. The duck then brought her little ones to the poultry yard to introduce them to society. She told the ducklings about the rules of behavior with local inhabitants. The duck presented its brood to the noblest fat drake, but he attacked the ugly duckling, and she was forced to protect her failed chick. Fat Drake ordered to drive the freak out of the yard. Mother assured that he would grow up and become like other ducklings. Unable to withstand the bullying and humiliation, the ugly duckling left the poultry yard. In search of a safer place, he came across a beautiful lake, on which there was no one. And the duckling decided to stay here to live. Time has passed. Despite his loneliness, the ugly duckling was happy that no one offends him. And then one day, a beautiful white bird with a long neck flew to his lake. The ugly duckling did not know what kind of bird it was, but he looked at it with admiration. He loved her with all his heart. How a duckling would like to be like this lovely white bird. Winter came and it started snowing. The ugly duckling saw white snow for the first time. He was delighted with this sight. But due to the fact that the winter was very snowy, it was very difficult for the duckling to find food. He had to walk around the neighborhood in search of food. He was cold and tired. So the ugly duckling got to the farmer's house. When the peasant saw a thin and unhappy chick, he felt sorry for him. The farmer decided that he would keep the duckling with him until he was fattened and matured. Spring has come. The owner took good care of the chick, and he grew up a lot. The duckling already needed a lot of space, and the farmer decided to release him to the lake. Standing on the shore of the lake, the ugly duckling looked at his reflection in the water. And he could not believe his eyes. He could not recognize himself, and thought that there was someone else behind him. And then the duckling realized that the wonderful bird in the reflection is himself. To celebrate, he thrashed and swam all over the lake from edge to edge. And suddenly he saw the same beautiful white bird with a long neck, which he had seen once before. The ugly duckling decided to swim closer to her. But the beautiful bird was not frightened, but on the contrary she smiled and winked, and together they swam across the lake. The ugly duckling couldn't believe his happiness. Passing by, a fat drake on the shore of the lake said that he had never seen such a beautiful young swan in his life. What was his surprise when he found out that the ugly duckling that he once drove from the poultry yard was a beautiful swan. It turns out that the ugly duckling was a swan from the very beginning. An egg accidentally fell into a duck's nest. And when the beautiful young swan returned home, then everyone in the poultry yard became very ashamed that they had once offended him because of his appearance. Once upon a time there was a prince in a distant land. It's time for him to get married. The king wanted his son to marry a real princess. The queen wished her son not just the daughter of the king and queen, but that she be gentle, intelligent, and graceful. And he himself wanted to follow the dictates of his heart. The prince went in search of the bride. After a few days of travel, he reached the nearest kingdom. The local king liked the polite and handsome prince,
Nice.
and he took him to his daughter.
Okay.
The princess was lovely. But after talking to her, the prince realized that she was very stupid, and there was nothing to even talk about with her. He apologized, said goodbye, and continued on his way. In the next kingdom, the king and queen were fascinated by the young prince and immediately invited him to meet their daughter. They took him to the dining room where the princess was dining. The young man greeted, but the girl did not even look at him. She was very passionate about her dinner. The prince thought the princess didn't care about him. Saying goodbye, he left this kingdom too. The prince traveled all over the world to find his beloved. After much trying, he lost all hope of finding a suitable bride. The king and queen were very concerned about this. Still, they were glad their son hadn't married the wrong girl. One night, a violent storm began. It rained like a bucket, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The prince could not sleep, watching the flashes of lightning and continuing to dream of his princess. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. When the prince opened, a young girl was standing on the threshold. She was shaking violently as she was soaked all over in the rain. The poor girl was alone in the midst of all this raging bad weather, but even in the rain she seemed very sweet. She said that she was lost in the woods and asked to warm up inside the house. The prince took pity on the poor girl and led her into the house. He led her into the living room and sat her in front of the fireplace. The girl said that she is a princess from a distant kingdom. They were attacked and her parents sent her out of the castle with 2 soldiers. But during the storm, they were lost, and the princess was left alone. It was hard for the queen to believe this, but she could not kick the girl out in such weather. When the prince entered the living room, she was already dressed in a dry and clean dress that the queen had given. She looked dazzling now. The prince could not believe his eyes. He fell in love. But at the behest of his father, he could not marry a girl if she is not a real princess. The queen realized that the prince had fallen in love. She reassured him and said that she knew how to find out if their guest was telling the truth or not. The queen went to the guest room, prepared for the young girl, and placed a small dry pea under her mattress. And on top, she ordered to put 6 more mattresses. Soon the girl went to sleep in her room. The next morning, everyone eagerly awaited the awakening of the princess. And when she woke up, the queen asked how she slept that night. The girl replied that she was very grateful for the night, and that she would sleep much worse outside in the rain. Despite this, she slept very badly and did not get enough sleep. And now her back hurts, as if she was sleeping on a stone. This was the answer the queen had been waiting for. She knew that only a princess could feel the pea hidden under the 7 mattresses. Hearing this and learning that the girl was a real princess, the prince told the king that he wanted to marry her. The king and queen happily blessed the marriage of their son and princess. The prince asked the girl to stay in the palace until the war in her kingdom was over. And he himself sent his troops to help save her country. They soon got married and lived happily ever after.